How many of you have ever been victim to buying a lemon? Do you remember the wonderful Chrysler Reliant K cars? And the AMC Pacer. Remember about what a glass trap that thing was? Ford Falcon? Yes. Yes. Ours was a Taurus. We bought one the year that Hannah was born. We replaced 3 engines in that thing. That was the year that they did the dual alloy, and they just blew heads all the time. Had 3 remanufactured engines from Iowa. Except for this one. Yeah, right. Except for this one. This one's good. Uh-huh. Yep. Cutlass Sierra. Mm-hmm. Yep. Hmm? A Cadillac. I believe it. I totally believe it. Pinto. Yeah, that's why they changed their name. Right? Oh my goodness. Yep. Okay, so maybe you weren't so victimized by lemons, but you ever fell victim to a gadget? You know, one of those $16.95 gadgets that's online, and you buy it, and it doesn't look a thing like. Doesn't look a thing like the way it looked on the ad. Huh? Doesn't work like it either. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Oh my goodness. Yes. But wait, if you buy now, you can help us get rid of more junk. Right? I'm glad that I for one am glad you have made my day. I am glad to know I am not the only fool that falls victim to that kind of stuff. I mean, I love gadgets. I do. I just love gadgets. And every once in a while, I'll get a gadget. Man, it looks just great. It's like, man, that would really be cool. And it comes, and Sue's like, what did you get now? And, yeah. Cool gadgets, yes, right. I've seen them all over the place. You know, never-ending gadgets for Christmas. It's like, yeah. Mm-hmm. I bought my son-in-law's. I try and do a dad gift every year for Christmas, and so I bought my son-in-law's 2 years ago. I bought them each one of those screwdriver things that looks like a snowflake. It's a snowflake, and then every end of the snowflake is a different setting for a screwdriver, and then it can also be a bottle opener and all this kind of stuff. And I think they're either using it for a paperweight or they're just hanging it on the tree. You know, because it sure doesn't work as a screwdriver. It's not the kind of thing. It would be the kind of screwdriver I would hand to Russ. Oh my goodness. So yes, we have been hoodwinked before. We have by smooth-talking salespeople, and oh my goodness, we can recover from those kinds of things. We can take it on the chin, have our dose of humble pie, and move on. But when it really gets difficult, is when the being taken advantage of becomes abusive, or we become victimized, and it gets personal. And someone slanders our reputation. Someone pulls the economic rug out from underneath us. someone even threatens our lives. All of those things. You ever felt victim to any of that stuff? It really seems unbearable to suffer the consequences of something that wasn't our fault and something that we didn't deserve. But if you've ever been treated that way, we are in good company biblically, aren't we? David was ripped off by Saul, wasn't he? Sure. Esau was duped by Jacob, right? Job was attacked by Satan himself, not to mention the Sabaeans and the Chaldeans. David is a young shepherd. He kills Goliath on the way back to town. Saul has killed his thousands. David his 10,000s, and the green-eyed monster jumps in out of nowhere. Envy, jealousy. And David had done only good for Saul's people. So people sang his praises. And that sent Saul into such a revengeful rage that David had to run for his life for more than a decade. He didn't deserve it, but it happened. Joseph didn't ask to be Daddy's favorite, but he was. And that favoritism created jealousy among the other brothers, to the point that they sold him into slavery. And yes, Joseph ultimately triumphed over his circumstances, but you know what? Initially, he was ripped off by his brothers. Jacob cheated Esau out of his birthright. And yes, Esau was rash, and yes, he was irresponsible. But Jacob took advantage of him at a vulnerable moment. And on and on and on. You know, we see all of these kinds of things, and we say it's unfair, we don't deserve it. Misery loves company. But company doesn't deaden the pain of unfair treatment. There are a number of natural reactions that we have when it comes to unfair treatment. First of all, knee-jerk reactions they are. First, there is an aggressive pattern whereby we blame others. We blame others. It not only focuses on the person who has wronged us, but it goes so far as to keep a running tally of the number of wrongs done against us, this attitude. It engineers a way for us to get back. And that aggression grows from simple anger until it boils into a seething rage. And it starts with resentment, and then it germinates into revenge, and in the process there's that bitterness that springs up, and it wraps itself around our hearts, and we are determined that we're going to get back at every person who has ever done anything to us, kind of like the guy that was bitten by a dog. He was bitten by a dog. And later he's told by his doctor, well, yes, you were bitten by the dog, but no, you don't have rabies. And so the guy gets out a list and pad and a pencil. He starts writing things, and the doctor says, listen, he says, you don't need to make out your will. You're not going to die. No, I'm sorry, I got the story wrong. He says, you do have rabies. You do have rabies. You know, you're not going to die. We can treat this. And the guy said, that doesn't matter. He said, I'm making a list of all the people I'm going to bite. Small wonder God warns us that vengeance alone belongs to Him, right? I don't know if you've lived long enough to benefit from seeing that statement come full circle? But let me tell you, from personal experience, when God decides to exact His revenge on our behalf, you really do feel bad for the other person. Boy, oh boy. God's vengeance is severe. And if we live long enough to see God's vengeance enacted on our behalf, it truly gives us opportunity to just pause and to shudder. Because it comes with a promise. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. So there is that aggressive pattern of blaming other people. The second part of that is that there's a passive pattern where we feel sorry for ourselves. Oh, poor me. It's almost like advertising for the world's biggest pity party. Poor me, poor me, poor me. Life isn't fair. Change your name to Eeyore. Have the little cloud follow you everywhere you go. But if we wallow in that despondency too long, we become depressed, we become immobile, we live the balance of our life indoors with the shades drawn and the lights off, so to speak. And just like quicksand, that pity party sucks us down, and we give in to that temptation of where we are never going to allow ourselves to be vulnerable ever again so that no one will ever be able to hurt us. We've constantly got our guard up. There was a bunch of soldiers in the Korean War, and they hired a local boy to cook and clean for them. And they were a bunch of pranksters, and so they would play pranks on this boy. They would nail his shoes to the floor. They'd put buckets of water over the door. When he'd come in, he'd get drenched, and all these other ha things. And then one day they finally realized, enough is enough. And so they sat the kid down. They said, we shouldn't have done this, And so he says, you mean no more buckets of water on door? No more shoes nailed to floor? No. So, good. No more spit in soup. See? That passive-aggressive stand. Thirdly, there's a third thing there, and that is a holding pattern. We postpone and we deny our feelings. Everything is left to simmer on the back burner, on a low flame, so to speak. And on the surface, everything seems to be calm and cheery. Doesn't bother me, doesn't bother me, doesn't bother me. But yet underneath, the feelings seethe and it eats away at us like acid. And the failure to deal with the problem in a timely manner leads to just doubt and disillusionment and unhealthy feelings of resentment that just bubble. And all three of these responses are very, very common, but it's interesting that we don't find any of these responses in anything that Peter has to say in chapter 2, beginning in verse 13. Peter says, "Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it is to be the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him, to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. In order for us to fully get the context, we have to understand the day, the historical context, right? And those of us that have gone through our How to Study the Bible class, we understand the importance of looking at the historical context of the passage. This was a time when Rome reigned supreme. This was not a benevolent monarchy like Prince Charles, okay? King Charles now. No, it was nothing like that. This was a dictatorship that was ruled by an insane demagogue named Nero, who was especially notorious for his wickedness and his cruelty to Christians. And many of the believers, remember those believers of the diaspora back in chapter 1, those who had been scattered abroad because of persecution, they had suffered tremendously. They had seen the bodies of their friends and loved ones bloody the sand of the Colosseum, and the corpses of friends soaked in oil and used to light the stadium so Nero could run his chariot around the track at night. So it is altogether natural and fitting that Peter is going to address this idea of unfair treatment. Sure, they had been the target of the grossest kinds of mistreatment by their government, by their fellow citizens, certainly even by their neighbors in some cases. There would certainly be the tendency for people to want to pick up arms and resist. But Peter says no. He has the audacity to say in verse 13, submit yourselves. Submit yourselves. God doesn't promote anarchy. Now, if we're all being honest this morning, I will say to you that I am almost banking on there being some sort of anarchy associated with the next election. Things are getting so out of control. Not just from the government side of things, but from the citizenry. These protests, which are so inane. People getting out and protesting and not even knowing what they're protesting for. Just doing it because. It's going to be ugly. God doesn't promote that kind of anarchy. He doesn't. Jesus was the one who said, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not suggesting that we roll over and die and let evil governments walk all over us. But nowhere in the Bible is there any kind of overt instruction against government recommended. Nowhere. Nowhere. We are not put on earth as believers for the purpose of overthrowing a government. We are here to establish a kingdom of the heart in this world. Now, that being said, there are definitely instances and occasions where we must stand our ground and stand firm and, yes, at times disobey a law that is disobedient to the higher law of God. Not buckling and compromising our convictions, not renouncing our faith. Those instances are few and far between. They are the exceptions to the rule. And yes, whenever possible, we are to render to Caesar the coin of civil obedience. Pray for those in authority. Pay our taxes. Obey the laws of the land. Live honorably under the domain of elected leaders. And the way that Peter says that we are to do that is to submit. And that's a very interesting word. One of my favorite Greek words is the word hupotasso. Hupotasso. It means to fall in rank under an authority. It is comprised of two words, tasso, which means to appoint or to order or to arrange, and then a hupo, which means to place under, to subordinate. And so it carries the idea of subjecting yourself or placing yourself under the authority of someone else. And, showing a deep dependency upon God, not only in the respect to God being the foremost, of course, of all authority, but ultimately to lesser officials. And he mentions them there. Kings and governors as well as the local people. I think in a lot of cases where we see civil disobedience, we would do a whole lot better if we would learn what it means to submit to the government. Maybe I should say it this way. The problem isn't in understanding what submission is. The problem is in doing it. And there's a reason why Peter tells us to submit. What is it? Look in verse 15. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you will put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Now again, Bible study, important context, historical context. Why would he have, we do Bible study and we have to answer three questions. Why is this here? What did it mean? What does it mean to me? Three simple questions. Why did he write it? Why is this here? What did it mean to me? That word silence, to put the silence, comes from a word that means to muzzle. Be real good to translate that. You can just muzzle everybody else. Right? Christians in the first century church, the ones to whom Peter is writing, were targets of all kinds of slanderous accusation. They're a secret sect. They're a cult. They're people of another kingdom. They're following another god. They're trying to stage a rebellion. They have plans to overthrow. They're cannibals. Right? Because we eat the flesh and drink the blood of Jesus. And throughout the Roman Empire, there are people who gossiped about their secret meetings and their subversive ideologies and their loyalty to another kingdom and their plans to infiltrate and indoctrinate and lead an insurrection. And this kind of paranoia was common, especially with the emperor. Especially with the emperor. Nero was paranoid beyond belief, to the point that he had many members of his own family murdered. Sons, daughters, wives, second cousins twice removed. So to muzzle these type of rumors, Peter encourages submission to the powers that be. And by doing so, he says, by doing right before God, you will muzzle the mouths of those who are passing these kinds of rumors around. The talk of ignorance people. Now, talk about this in today's terms. What does this text look like for us today? Now is where we get to the point of, we know what it means. Now what does it mean to me? So we look at 13, 14, 15. What does it mean to me? Mm-hmm. 501c3. Mm-hmm. Okay. Come on. What is our response supposed to be? Oh, it's getting kind of personal, Tina. She said, love your enemies and do good to those who persecute you. What else? Means we need to obey the government. Means we need to pay our taxes. Means we need to follow the rules. Drive the speed limit.
Now you're getting personal.
Moving right along. Mm-hmm. Let me give you a classic example of how this affects us. Now, in some larger cities, there are certain codes that need to be obeyed, right? The government is run by civil authorities. And those civil authorities do not have the right to tell us what to preach, what to teach, what philosophy to adopt as a church. No. If they attempt to do that, we have the right, albeit the duty, to rebel because of a higher law than that law. In that case, it is good to quote the apostles. It is better to obey God than to obey man. But those authorities do have the right to tell us, in this room you may put 150 people and no more. If you go beyond that, you're violating a fire code. And you'll be subject to a fine and possibly other penalties. So in that case, it's neither wise nor right for us to break that civil law. It's not a law that violates God's law. Yep. Well, then you use the civil court system. Yep, COVID shutdowns. Although, I will say, to her credit, not that I want to credit her very much, but to her credit, our governor, in every one of her edicts, had a clause in there that said this does not apply to religious institutions. Yeah, because she knew she'd get in trouble. Now, there were a lot of places that voluntarily shut down. We did for a couple of months, just because we didn't know. We didn't know. Early on, we didn't know. Once we began to learn, well, we didn't shut down. You know, we took precaution. But early on, we didn't know what we're dealing with. Verse 16 is a principle that he gives us. He says here, live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the emperor. The principle comes to the surface, and the principle is this: don't use your freedom as a covering for evil. Don't use or abuse grace as a cloak to hide evil and call it freedom. Keeping a right perspective. We don't submit because we necessarily agree. We submit because deep within we support the rules in codes and regulations. Well, we might not. At times they're petty. No, we submit because it is the will of God, and we submit because we are bond slaves of God. And then he gives us these little staccato bursts here in the last verse. Act as free men, honor all men, love the brother, honor the king, all wrapped around that principle. Don't use your freedom as a covering for evil. What does that look like? What does that look like when we use our freedom as a covering for evil? Televangelists. Okay? I saw, just within the last couple of weeks, I saw a clip of I'm trying to think of which TV evangelist it is. Dark-haired guy, has the toothy grin, has a big airplane. Huh? No, not him. Copeland, thank you, Kenneth Copeland. And I want to tell you, it gave me the heebie-jeebies. Okay? He was talking about the blood of Christ, you know. That was nice and sloppy. He was talking about the blood of Christ, and he had some other guy up there on the stage with him, and they were in the process of celebrating the Lord's table. And the clip showed both of these charlatans taking a very ornate knife, a hunting knife, and slicing their hands. And then each of them squeezing some blood out of their hands into a cup of wine or juice. And then Copeland swirls this stuff together and drinks it. Both. And now his blood has mingled with my blood. And it was as if Satan himself was speaking. It was the most evil, wicked thing I've seen in a long time. It was definitely demonic. Definitely demonic. I mean, you could see the demon right in his face. Perfect example. You know, don't use your freedom as a cloak for evil. Don't use your freedom to take advantage. Don't become a carpetbagger Christian. Remember those carpetbaggers after the Civil War? Everybody and his brother moving down south. You know what that was? That was early gadgets. If you buy this snake oil, it'll cure everything. Everything from mumps to rubella and the shine in your eye. Forever be aware of the temptation to abuse our Christian liberty. It is so easy to stretch things and to make it work for us rather than for the glory of God. And yes, that is what a lot of these charlatans, most of these charlatans do. You know, all of these folks that are so into, you know, these healing ministries. You know, if Oral Roberts was such a faith healer, why do you have to have a hospital? Huh? You know, why didn't he go up and down the halls of that hospital and just empty it? And on and on and on. Well, we're going to stop there for today. Pick it up again next time. But think about this. You know, we're living in challenging times. We've lived in challenging times before. And yet, it just, boy, it really does make us have to do some soul searching real deep when it comes to being obedient, submitting, even when we don't agree, even when we don't like, even when we didn't vote for. But that's the way it is. That unless it goes against the laws of God, we are responsible to obey and to submit. And to do so, why? Because we agree? Because we like? No, none of that stuff. It's so that we can put to silence the talk of foolish people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Only from the standpoint of civil laws, not when it comes to moral laws. Because we know that the Bible tells us that abortion is wrong. Okay? We have every right, albeit every responsibility, to protest those things, to vote against those things, to testify against those things, to fund those who work to prevent such things. Yes, that is our responsibility. But when it comes time to, be like these nitwits that tried to kidnap and kill the governor, if they were going to say that they were doing so in the name of Jesus, that would lend itself to the foolish talking. Well, look, they're some kind of a whacked out cult, and they think that the best thing that they're going to be able to do is to, take out the leadership and so on. So we need to get rid of all of them. Well, that's foolish talk. Obviously, if we don't try and kill the governor, we will put to silence that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's very simple from the standpoint of if someone that you or someone knows you and they see you driving like a crazy person and they say, must be he just got out of church. Has to do with reputation. We think that we're above the law. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. Yeah. You don't give them any wiggle room. You don't give them the advantage. Yeah. Right. That's right. Oh, I agree. Mm-hmm. Yep, there are some. There are some that are ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Ridiculous law. When Sue and I were first married and we lived in Indiana in Winona Lake, the ducks are highly prized and protected. And if you run over a duck, you are in big trouble, let me tell you. So yeah, you do a lot of stopping in the middle of the road while Mama Mallard and her little flock is crossing. One time I'm driving down the road, and this duck is flying right at me, flying right into my windshield, and I am doing everything possible to swerve from this duck. Didn't hit him, but man, oh man, he came awful close. Yeah, I mean, they would arrest you. Whew. Boy, oh boy. Yeah. Anyway. All right, we'll pick it up there next time.